from the Finkelstein Memorial Library to provide some welcome remarks.
Thank you so much, Jamila, and welcome everyone to our program this evening, which is Frederick Douglass, A Legacy of Love and Liberation. We want to thank you all for celebrating Black History Month with us, and a special thank you to the African American Historical Society of Rockland for co-sponsoring this event. We at Finkelstein Memorial Library are always delighted to partner with AAHS on special programs and initiatives, and this is certainly one of those. Tonight, we are going to host a presentation and panel discussion highlighting Frederick Douglass's ties to February, his influential visits to Nyack, and his lasting impact on today's movements for justice and community empowerment. With that, I am honored to reintroduce the president of the African American Historical Society of Rockland, Jamila Brathwaite.
Thank you so much, Maria Vanessa. It's always a pleasure to partner with the Finkelstein Memorial Library. Welcome. I'm Jamila Brathwaite, president of the African American Historical Society of Rockland County. This evening, we gather to celebrate and reflect as we close Black History Month. However, at AAHS, every month is Black History Month. While February offers a month of celebration, it also serves as a powerful reminder of our ongoing mission to research, to preserve, and to share the rich and vital history of Black communities. Our work does not begin or end with this month. It is a continuous commitment to ensuring these stories are remembered, honored, and passed forward. And with that, I'd like to introduce Vicki Copeland, who will sing Lift Every Voice and Sing.
You're new.
Hi, everyone. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. I'm going to do the short version as I was requested. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Vicki, for that wonderful rendition. Now, my goal here is to provide a very brief overview of Frederick Bailey, who later changed his surname to Douglass after escaping slavery. Frederick was born in Talbot County, Maryland, either in 1817 or 1818. Of course, birth dates of the enslaved were rarely recorded. Douglass was separated from his mother as an infant, as was a common practice in Maryland. The idea was to break the natural bond between mother and child. She worked on another plantation that was about 12 miles away, and Douglass remembers seeing her only about 5 times in his life, and only in the darkness of night. She would die when he was 7 years old, and he would grow up in the cruelty of slavery with very few memories of her. He was put to work at age 6, and his life as a young man was a litany of savage beatings and whippings. But by 1838, at the age of 20, he successfully escaped to the North, landing in New York City, and was put in the care of the Black radical abolitionist David Ruggles. His fiancée, a free Black woman named Anna Murray, who had helped him plan and fund his escape, met him in New York City, and they were married at the home of David Ruggles. Ruggles introduced him to abolition and a group of abolitionists. 1 week after he arrived and married Anna, he and his new bride moved to a safer location in Bedford, Massachusetts. They later settled in Rochester, New York in 1847. So, what is Frederick Douglass's connection to February? We know that Douglass didn't know his birth month. He was suspicious, however, that his birth month was February. In addition, he really liked the ideas around the celebration of Valentine's Day. And so he chose February 14th as his birthday. Another hint that made him suspicious that he was born in February was a memory of one of the few times that he saw his mother. And she brought him a sweet cake, a ginger cake. She had shaped it in the shape of a heart, and it had a rich dark ring of glaze around it. Douglass said of that cake and his visit, quote, "I was victorious and well off for the moment, prouder on my mother's knee than a king upon his throne." Douglass Day is an annual celebration held in February 14th, and it was held after his death in 1895 and was celebrated in the early 20th century, but it began to wane until it was revitalized again in 2017. I think that this is a celebration that we too should consider revitalizing and celebrating the legacy of Frederick Douglass as well as other Blacks in history. So let's talk about Douglass and Rockland County. Now, some people probably know the story about Frederick Douglass speaking in Nyack. We probably, if you're connected to history, you've heard this. That date was in Wednesday, August 3rd, 1865. And we were taught basically that this was the only time that Frederick Douglass was in Nyack. But we've discovered that there have been 3 occasions where Frederick Douglass spoke in Nyack in Rockland County. At this time, he was living in Rochester. He spoke at Union Hall that was located at the corner of Main Street and Broadway in Nyack to a very large crowd. During this talk, Douglass expressed the legitimate cause of the Civil War was slavery, and that none of the people of the South who fostered the institution of slavery should escape the charge of complicity. He also advocated for equal rights and for suffrage for Black men. Another time that Frederick Douglass was in Nyack was at the Smithsonian Hall that was located on Lower Bird Street. This venue held about 850 people and was said to be overcrowded. The Black and white members of the Grant and Wilson clubs marched with their lit torches and a band through the streets of Nyack to the Smithsonian Hall in honor of Frederick Douglass. Douglass spoke for 1 hour and 45 minutes straight. And it was said that he could have spoken twice as long and still have left the audience wanting more. His conversation was about supporting the Republican Party, crediting its policies for Black liberation, and he discussed the social conditions of Black people, both as free and enslaved people. This was truly a tremendous occasion in Rockland County. Now, the last instance that we were able to find of Frederick Douglass speaking in Nyack was on Thursday, October 23rd, 1879. On this occasion, the papers explained that this was an overflowing crowd, that there had been no other crowd as large as this one in the county of Rockland for a public event. This was at the Nyack Opera House on Depew in South Franklin. The venue was overwhelmed with the large crowd filling the sidewalks, the streets, and inside the venue. Now, the papers talk about the fact that every seat was taken, that there were people sitting on the stage. I can't imagine what that looked like. There was standing room only. People were in the hallways, in the vestibules, and going outside the door, onto the sidewalks, and up the streets. Clearly, there was no fire marshal during these years because that would have been a disaster if anything had happened, but it didn't. And people were very excited about this event. You will see on this slide that there's a little clip that came from a newspaper that said that Spark Hill is quiet this week. There's no one there. And we know that Spark Hill was a very Black community during the time. And so everyone from every corner of the county was said to be represented at this event. Douglass was praised for his as a highly knowledgeable individual and that no one was better acquainted with the political questions of the country than Frederick Douglass at this time. While the historical record does not fully capture the sentiments of Nyack's Black community during Douglass's visits, our historical imagination allows us to consider the profound impact of his presence. At a time when Black Americans were fighting for full citizenship and equality, hearing Douglass speak, an icon of resilience and of advocacy, must have been both affirming and inspiring. His words likely reinforced Black people's struggles and their hopes and their determination, serving as a rallying force for those seeking justice in their own lives. Douglass's visits were not just a moment in time. They were a part of a large continuum of Black activism and empowerment in Rockland County. And with that, I bring forth Josiah Hawley and Curtis McDuffie, who will inspire us with their spoken word.
First, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Josiah Hawley. I am 8 years old and I live in Rock Hill, New York. I'm reciting the poem Hey Black Child by Usaini Perkins. Hey Black Child, do you know who you are? I mean who you really are? Do you know you could be who you want to be if you try to be what you can be? Hey Black Child, do you know where you're going? I mean where you're really going? Do you know you can learn what you want to learn if you try to learn what you can learn? Hey Black Child, do you know you are strong? I mean really strong? You know you could do what you want to do if you try to do what you can do. Hey Black Child, be what you can be. Learn what you must learn. Do what you can do. And tomorrow your nation shall be what you want it to be.
Hey,
Thank you.
good job.
And Curtis,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes, we can.
Oh,
Go
okay.
forth. Go forth.
Okay. I have the blood of a million slaves coursing through my veins, and it runs so hot it's like a burning flame. I'm a direct bloodline descendant of the oldest one. I've been reincarnated as the boldest one. I've been sent to speak truth to power to the coldest ones in the oldest tongue. I am the chosen one. The chosen one. Mhm, mhm. Come on, y'all. Oh, yeah, y'all. All right. We went from Superman to man, now y'all say pyramid to projects. We were taken from the motherland, shipped to another land, yeah. Pyramid to projects, hold on. Went from a black man to a brown man, pyramid to projects, oh Lord. Like African to American, now that's pyramid to projects. Check it out. We went from eating fine to eating swine. We went from living well to a living hell. But most of our people, they don't understand. They rather pull out their biscuits and kill the black man, never realizing that's a plan of the other man with the upper hand. See, y'all got to understand me. Went from Superman to man. Now y'all say pyramid to projects. We were taken from the motherland, shipped to another land. Yeah, pyramid to projects. Hold on. Went from a black man to a brown man. Pyramid to projects. Oh, Lord. Like African to American. Now that's pyramid to projects. Check it out. There are so many things that stay on my mind. So if I deviate, just remember I'm doing time. Why can't the wind reach out and touch the sky? Why are the old and the sick, they just left to die? Where is the child not yet old enough to sigh? That's when the angels start to cry. When there's no one around who feeds the birds, and when the beggar begs forgiveness, who hears the words, Mom, will I ever grow up before I die? That's when the angels start to cry. But y'all don't feel me. Went from Superman to man. Now y'all say pyramid to project. We were taken from the motherland, shipped to another land. Yeah, pyramid to projects. Hold on. Went from a black man to a brown man. Pyramid to projects. Oh Lord. Like African to American. Now that's pyramid to project. Check it out. Yeah, anyway, that's where I'll leave it off at. Cut it short for you.
Thank you so much, Josiah Hawley and Curtis McDuffie.
You're very welcome.
Beautiful.
Very welcome. God bless.
Same to you.
God bless.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kimberly S. Newberry, visiting assistant professor of art history at the University of Richmond. Newberry's primary research examines contemporary art in Western museums. Dr. Kimberly's brief Ignite talk underscores Frederick Douglass and his relationship with photography. And right after Dr. Newberry, we will start our Love and Liberation panel discussion and Q&A session. Thank you. Dr. Newberry.
Thank you. And good evening. Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to be here with the African American Historical Society of Rockland County for this important tribute to this important man at such an important time. I am thrilled to be in such distinguished company. There is a theory that the quality of your questions determines the quality of your life. And my sister has always asked deep, rich, engaging questions of those of us who love her as well as the world. So I thank you, Jamila, for asking me to join you this evening. Photographs have an intimate relationship with history. German philosopher and cultural critic Walter Benjamin wrote, "Photographs become standard evidence for historical occurrences and acquire a hidden political significance." Photographs, in many, many ways, photography is the first drafter of history. The control of imagery becomes the control of history, which lies at the root of ideology. So let's approach apartheid, which was a system of institutionalized racial segregation that existed in South Africa from 1948 until the early 1990s, based on white supremacy, which encouraged state repression of Black African and Asian South Africans for the benefit of the nation's minority white population. Apartheid endured 46 years. The term resistance photography was used to signify photography that in any way challenged the beliefs, policies, or actions of the South African government. Photography was a powerful tool of resistance for many reasons. Much of its power lay in its ability to expose the humanity of non-white racial groups that apartheid concealed at all costs. Resistance photography allowed whites to see the conditions their government's policies forced Africans into and reflect on the inhumanity of apartheid. And then there was June 16th, 1976, in Soweto, 12 miles west of Johannesburg, South Africa. The image, please. Police opened fire on students protesting the enforcement of teaching in the West Germanic language Afrikaans. The photograph of a mortally wounded schoolboy, Hector Peterson, being carried by another schoolboy while his sister ran next to them, was published around the world. Resistance photography. It is believed that this iconic photograph, capturing a moment in South Africa's harrowing racial history, led to the dismantling of apartheid. The control of imagery becomes the control of history. The next slide, please. On the day he died, February 20th, 1895, Frederick Douglass was the most photographed American of the 19th century. Not even Abraham Lincoln had been photographed as many times as Douglass. He was fascinated by the power of images and took particular interest in the emerging technologies of photography. During the 4 years of Civil War, he wrote more extensively on photography than any other American. His speeches often visited themes of art and pictures, with his reflections centering on the psychological and political potentials of images and their relationship between art, culture, and human dignity, believing in their transformational potential, particularly with respect to combating racism, resistance photography. Douglass envisioned a radical transformational potential in certain art and imagery, in particular photography. Douglass believed that not only do we create pictures, our minds are repositories of pictures. He came to understand the intimate connection between the art of presentation and the reactions and images that words could evoke in the minds of people. Here, Douglass writes in Pictures in Progress, poets, prophets, and reformers are all picture makers, and this ability is the secret of their power and of their achievements. They see what ought to be by the reflection of what is, and endeavor to remove the contradiction. Douglass believed through photography that we could learn new possibilities of not only who we are, but also possibilities of what we can do in various situations, of how we can transform the world. Douglass recognized the close connection between photography and freedom. A photograph accurately captured a moment in time and space, and truthful images represented abolitionists' greatest weapon, with their ability to call out slavery and expose it as a dehumanizing horror. Resistance photography. Whenever he could, Frederick Douglass took the opportunity to sit for a photograph. Between 1841 and 1895, there were 160 photographs taken of this man whose prophetic vision and creative genius knew no bounds. Douglass recognized, however, that the power of photography depended upon its circulation in the public sphere. Photographs needed, like writing, to be published in books, newspapers, broadsides, and pamphlets in order to be disseminated. With the dissemination of his photographs, Douglass wrote himself into the public sphere and became the most famous Black man in the Western world, thus acquiring cultural and political power. Always dressing for his sittings, Douglass, according to one admirer, appeared majestic in his wrath. Next image, please. According to American diplomat and poet James Russell Lowell, the very look and bearing of Douglass are eloquent and are full of an irresistible logic against the oppression of his race. Resistance photography. As photographic subject, Douglass carried an agenda. First, he never smiled, refusing the racist caricatures that portrayed Blacks as happy slaves and servants. No, 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 no. He presented himself in dignified dress, reflective of a respectable citizen. And lastly, his photographs came to represent his visual autobiography, as they evolved along with him from freedom fighter, steely visionary, wise prophet, and finally, elder statesman. Across 50 years of photographs, Douglass fought for the public image of African Americans. Across the next century, in his visual afterlife, the photographs continued his fight. Thank you. Show the next photo. Ah, there he is, continuing in his afterlife.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberly, for that enlightening presentation. And now, without further ado, please welcome our Legacy and Liberation moderator, Dr. Elias Rodriguez, who is the Assistant Professor of African American Literature at Sarah Lawrence College. Elias, take it away.
Thank you, Jamila, and thank you everyone for all of your wonderful and beautiful contributions. I'm gonna read some brief bios of our esteemed panel. I will move somewhat quickly, but I assure you that their achievements are so voluminous that they cannot be encapsulated in this introduction. So our first panelist, Dr. David Lucander, is Professor of Multicultural Studies in the School of Arts, Education, Humanities, and Social Sciences at Rockland Community College. He's the author of the 2014 book, Winning the War for Democracy, The March on Washington Movement, 1941-6, the editor of a co-editor of the 2015 collection of A. Philip Randolph's speeches and writings for jobs and freedom, and the author of numerous articles on such subjects as Black history, the long civil rights movement, the racial politics of baseball, and more. Our second panelist, Reverend Earl S. Miller, is a pastoral counselor with more than 25 years in Christian counseling, the CTO of Humanity-Focused Solutions, and a Human Rights Commissioner in Orange County, New York. He has earned master's degrees in organizational leadership and marriage family therapy. In the past, he has served as Nyack College's Executive Director of Community Relations, President of the Nyack Rotary Club, and as a board member of Leadership Rockland, the Nyack Center, the African American Historical Society, and Head Start of Rockland. Our third panelist, Willie Trotman, is the president of the Spring Valley NAACP and a longtime organizer for racial justice in Rockland County. Both a veteran and a staunch advocate in the work for equality in East Ramapo schools and in the effort to preserve Brooks School, Trotman is also the author of various pieces in such publications as the Journal News, Forward, and more. Pertinent to tonight, he was also foundational in the revival of the African American Historical Society of Rockland County, and in 2020, he won the Champion of Equal Justice Award from the Legal Aid Society of Rockland. Finally, our last panelist, but certainly not least, Latanya M. Watkins, is a lawyer and lifelong resident of Rockland County. Watkins attended Rockland Community College, Pace University, and New York Law School. She worked for 18 years at the law offices of Mitchell P. Schechter. She has been co-chair of the Rockland Police Reform Committee for the Rockland County Sheriff's Department, a former NAACP legal redress chairperson, a founding member of the Rockland County Black Bar Association, and former candidate for Rockland County Executive. Today, she is a life member of the NAACP, co-chair of the Mental Health Committee of the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow, a member of the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus, and a member of the Board of Trustees for RCC. Normally this is the part where I would ask you to applaud our candidates, our panelists, but we're on Zoom, so I will, try to clap loudly enough for all of us. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to skip our first introductory question about what brought you to your work in Rockland for the sake of time, and I'll just jump into the more specific questions to bring us forward from Douglass up to the present. So our first question is for Dr. David Lucander. As a scholar of civil rights history, how do you see Douglass's legacy continuing into the civil rights movement, and what aspects of his legacy resonate most with you?
It's a good one. That's a Sarah Lawrence College professor question. And y'all have me going first. And, really, I feel like we already could have just ended this program and said it was incredible. Jamila gave a fantastic presentation of local history, awesome poetry by Curtis and Josiah. I just kept thinking of you talking back to one of my favorite writers, Dr. Margaret Burroughs, who wrote this poem in 1968 called "What Shall I Tell My Children Who Are Black?" And, young Josiah, I could kind of hear you saying to her, I'm going to be, and I'm going to be me. And that was just a beautiful poem. Vicky, I've done so much on Zoom since 2020. It's the first live singing I've heard on Zoom. And that was just like amazing. So just on behalf of all the other presenters, Reverend Miller, Trustee Watkins, Mr. Trotman, thank you all for what you've already offered us. But, in terms of the legacy that Frederick Douglass has for the civil rights movement, that legacy is just so pronounced. When Dr. King taught a class, his only college class he ever taught at Morehouse, his alma mater, he assigned writings by Frederick Douglass in his philosophy class. So we're aware of this connection. And Douglass is one of those people, he writes it himself, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. And you could hear that, if you see a photograph of Diane Nash at 20 years old, sitting in at a lunch counter in Nashville, of John Lewis going up to big mean Sheriff Jim Clark, crossing that bridge in Selma. That's Malcolm X working for prisoners' rights. That's A. Philip Randolph standing out at the Lincoln Memorial on August 28th, 1963, looking at 250,000 people, knowing he organized and planned that event, introducing Martin Luther King. And power concedes nothing without demand. I mean, that's a thread going through all 14 years of Dr. King's public life. And that's the thing about Douglass, is he remains so germane to us today. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. You can paint that on the wall of every gym and training facility across the country, and people are going to know something about what that means, and they're going to connect to that. And if one of you is looking for like a side job, start an Etsy shop making tea bags with Frederick Douglass quotes on them, because he has so much to offer, and he puts these things, in such a way that it can still connect with us. And the thing he's really offering us is a vision of freedom. In so much of the fractures and division in this country from its inception to now is about freedom. And what is freedom? and who defines it and who has it. I'm also running a stopwatch on all of my comments. Got my app going right now, so I'm going to stop right there. Thank you for that question, Professor Rodriguez.
Thank you for that wonderful answer. That was beautiful. And it brings us somewhat directly to our next question, particularly the question of freedom, as well as the position of Martin Luther King as lying in the lineage of Douglass, and bringing not only legal, but also challenges to the legal system of Jim Crow. This question is for Latanya M. Watkins. Speaking of freedom of the law, Frederick Douglass was, of course, a fierce advocate for justice and explicitly challenged the legal system that upheld racial oppression, most obviously in his efforts as an abolitionist, but still in the postbellum period after emancipation, was staunchly an advocate for justice and in regards to the law in particular. Thinking about today, and based on your experience in criminal law, where do you see the most pressing legal challenges today in the pursuit of equal justice for Black people?
There's a scripture, good evening, everyone, and it's in the book of Esther. And I actually said this to someone, I believe it was yesterday, that we are at a time such as this. So this question for me is very loaded with the reality of the time that we're in right now. All of the struggles, all of the accomplishments, all of the things that we have been able to accomplish that stand at the foundation of all that Frederick Douglass pushed for, all that he advocated for, all that he dreamed of for our reality and his. The criminal justice system, where I spend most of my time, is still plagued with the same realities that existed, unfortunately, many, many, many years ago. There is no recognition of the humanity of people of color in this system. They see the reality of what exists on paper, not the reality of who's standing in front of them, which dehumanizes the defendants who come to court who are simply accused of a crime, not convicted, not found guilty, not beyond a reasonable doubt, not any of those things. So when I think about the criminal justice system today, and I think about all that Frederick Douglass advocated for and fought against and spoke against, I think about the advocates that don't necessarily exist today. When I walk into court, most times I am one of very few who look like me, except for the people who come and stand in front of the judge that are accused of criminal offenses. So when I think about the system now, and if there is a connection to then, I think the answer would be, we're probably in a worse position now than we were in the 1800s, because in the 1800s, we knew we were in the terms of enslavement. We were legally not recognized as human. We were legally not accepted as people who had equal rights or respect. In 2025, obviously, we are losing so many things. We are subjected to inhumane treatment that I don't think we ever thought we would see again. So in light of what's going on politically in this country, I think the fire that Frederick Douglass had, we need to get it back. We need to fight. This is a man who taught himself to read and write. We have much more abilities and much more access and much more power than he ever had. So we need to look back, to look forward, to understand what we need to accomplish in 2025 and beyond. So I think we can learn from all that he did, but we absolutely have to go further than he did, because we have the resources to do that in 2025. So thank you, Dr. Rodriguez.
No, thank you. I'm so grateful that you brought us to the Book of Esther, because I was thinking about Douglass's religious faith as well, and its importance in helping him to continue to muster his struggles against inequality. This, of course, brings me to a question for our Reverend Earl Miller. Considering the issue of inequality, what lessons from Douglass's life do you think are most relevant for religious leaders today who are addressing issues of inequality and division?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to participate in this wonderful event. And this is a time for reflection, for inspiration, and hopefully for us to share with one another in such a way that we grow in our efforts to be the change agents that we celebrate, even as we recognize Frederick Douglass and his contributions to the society. As it relates to religious leaders, first of all, I'm really myself encouraged and challenged by the life and the work of Douglass, because he was openly a man of faith. He was a licensed minister. Some of his favorite writers were theologians who taught and wrote on the scriptures and the life of Christ. There's a biblical principle. What's done in private before God is openly rewarded. And Douglass was a man of prayer. There are many examples of him intentionally practicing biblical principles, the teachings particularly of Christ. But as it relates to ministry today in this time, we need leadership, spiritual leadership that models the convictions of Douglass and how he exercised those convictions earlier in his life and his spiritual journey. He was a part of a church in his Maryland community, and in defiance to the institution of slavery, he taught a Sunday school class that obviously encouraged and inspired spiritual growth, but that also taught members of his community, members of all ages, how to read. And he mentioned that being one of the great joys of his earlier spiritual experience. I think now more than ever before, we need preachers who are willing to preach, to speak truth to power, not just to preach in the pulpits, but to preach in the streets, to preach in the halls of government, to inform and to inspire others to walk in a way that reflects their beliefs. I could go on, but I will say this. Douglass challenged the Christian community of America. He hated the hypocrisy of the Christian church, a church that supported the institution of slavery. He not only stood against and spoke to the white church, but even to some Black churches that he felt reflected the practices of the dominant culture. We need preachers who would be leaders today, not just in word, but action, not only in terms of doing what they feel is right, but also with the spiritual empowerment that brings a greater reality of the value of faith to us as a people, the faith that has enabled us to persevere and to move forward in spite of a long history of challenge.
Thank you. As you just alluded to, Douglas's faith came with deep political convictions. His God was a righteous God, so to speak. And of course, and here, Willie, I'm getting ready to ask you a question. Those political convictions shone through in his efforts through the Civil War, prior to the Civil War, and after the Civil War, right? He fought tirelessly for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, recognizing them as critical to securing freedom, citizenship, and voting rights for Black Americans. Of course, in the last 2 months, but certainly in the last 50 years, we've continued to see challenges to those hard-won rights. Willie, how is the NAACP working both locally and nationally to protect and advance the rights of Black people today?
Thank you. First, let me echo the sentiments given by Dr. Lucander on young Mr. Copeland there. I mean, young Mr. Harley. You have to see this guy in person do his poem. It's pretty awesome, and it makes you feel proud. And thanks to Vicky, Miss Newberry, and of course, Mr. McDuffie. I think the challenge is if I went back and I stood up next to Martin and W.E.B. Du Bois and Frederick Douglass, I think they'd be disappointed in us and where we are as a people and as a country, and as a world, actually. The NAACP continues to do voter registrations on a regular basis. In every event we have a voter registration table. But I think we as individuals have to look within ourselves. Oftentimes I say, once upon a time, you had to pull a level. Now all you have to do is make a dot. And we seem to have problems making that dot. It's not just that Kamala Harris lost. Did she lose simply because she was a female? And did we vote because against her because she was a female? And I think that the changes that have been made within the last month, carries a heavy burden for us, and the struggle to find equal rights to vote. I think that what Frederick Douglass had it right. I think Martin had it right. But have we passed any lasting, long legislation since, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act? But we continue to fight those battles here. It affects us here locally. Our school board is dominated by 6 white males, who believe in private school versus public school education. We continue to fight that battle. We went to court we won the case in 2020, early 2020, and it, believe it or not, pertained to voting rights. So the accomplishments from 50 years ago, I don't see us having made those kind of strides to enhance those. But we continue in every facet to ensure that people have the right to vote, and that we continue to encourage people to vote. It's very, very important. We continue to lose our rights. And unless we, as the NAACP, which was founded in 1909, reach out across the boundaries and encourage people to vote. It's not just that the NAACP is encouraging people. We need other organizations to come together as one at a round table, say, what is it that we're losing? Or women losing their rights, or men losing their right, especially men of color, or are we convincing our younger people to register? They can start registering to vote now at 16. So we keep talking about that, especially in the schools. That's very, very important. So people can register to vote at the age of 16. That's important. And so I think that the NAACP continues to make every effort to ensure that people are registered to vote and that they go out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to keep thinking about those legal and political changes that are necessary, or at least desirable, let's say. And this is a question for Latanya. Dr. Lucander, of course, already quoted this, where Douglass believed that, quote, power concedes nothing without a demand, unquote. From your perspective as an attorney, what legal strategies or policy changes do you see as essential in continuing the fight for civil rights and ensuring that Black communities have fair and equitable treatment under the law?
I think it's so important to recognize for us as a community and pretty much us as a nation to recognize what the criminal justice system is. I think I heard yesterday or the day before, someone said, a kid who's sentenced to prison, their life is over. And I think many of us in this society believe that, as opposed to thinking that this is just a step away and time for them to reorganize and get themselves together and then to rejoin society. There was a young girl many years ago who was 18 who was sentenced to 18 years in prison. And the news people and her family members and lots of other people that they questioned said her life is over. And my thought was, she's 18. She's going to spend 18 years in prison. And that is a travesty of just all kinds of levels. But she'll be 36. How many of us decided what we would do when we grew up at 36, as opposed to already having it laid out for us? So I think we have to decide, what is it, especially in criminal justice, what is it that we want to accomplish? Are we trying to throw people away? Or are we trying to organize and create a society where people who do wrong are punished for it, but they're also rehabilitated and made better than they were when they went into the system of justice, so that when they come home, they can be better and contribute to society? Or are we creating cycles of people repeating the system over and over and over again? We give them nothing when they're incarcerated. We teach them nothing when they're away. And then we bring them home, put them in the same environment that is diminished, deplorable, and doesn't have opportunity, because that's how this society is designed. And then they repeat, and recidivism is a reality. What we need to do as a society is recognize that 95% of the people in the criminal justice system will be coming out. And we have to decide what type of communities we want. We also have to align ourselves with the concept of cooperative economics in the Black community, because whatever we're going to lose as a result of this new administration, we're going to have to supplement for ourselves. There is no one on a white horse who's going to sweep into the Black community and fix it for us. Those days are over and never existed, to be honest. So we need to create economic opportunities within our community that sustain us, just as we did before. When I was a kid, there were families, and I grew up at Columbus Avenue Apartments here in Spring Valley. And there was some family that had the starch, some that had the vegetables, some that had the meat, some that had the bread, and some that had the Kool-Aid. And all the kids met in the courtyard, and that's how we had dinner on the weekends. We need to get back to that, because it's going to take a village to raise our children and the economic viability of our community. So we need to get all of those things. It's not just the justice system alone. The justice system can't stand by itself. We need to think economically and what we need to do and create for the betterment of our community.
Thank you. I was thinking as you were talking that, of course, central to the communities, to the possibilities that people have before they're incarcerated, to the possibilities that they have on the inside and after, of course, are schools. And thinking about and here, David Lucander, I'm about to ask you a question. And thinking maybe especially about schools, not only as a place that are central to opportunities for people in our community, but also as a place in which Black people's rights are being challenged currently. Frederick Douglass, of course, was deeply invested in his children's school and in schooling more generally. Jamila and I have actually talked about the degree to which he upbraided his kids' instructors for not teaching them the right things about Black history and about Black people. Sorry, now I've gone on a tangent. Point being, how do you see Frederick Douglass's commitment to justice and freedom informing today's multicultural studies curricula?
Frederick Douglass would go north. I've been watching closely what a mess has been happening in Florida's college and university system. He'd leave, as did James Weldon Johnson, who wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing, as did Zora Neale Hurston. But events like this Professor Rodriguez, you can't go get jumbled and go off on tangents, because if you asked me that question half an hour ago, I would go on about how, he taught himself to read with the Columbian orator, like, and this is at a time where in Maryland it was illegal for enslaved people to read or write. He did that. And for those of you with children, I actually think about that when I'm like trying to grade papers or work on a draft of a piece to write. And my spouse is laughing and my daughter is chatting. And I'm like, oh, this is impossible. I'm like, no, Frederick Douglass had less resources than me, and he got it done. That's that inspiration you can always pull with him. But, after hearing some of the things that our panelists are talking about, Douglass was definitely, he was a champion of universal public education. Like, he legit is like on record. And I think it's because he knew the power of education. He knew the power of literacy. The more I read, the more I was led to abhor and detest my enslavers. He wrote that, and there's literally a book out there he dropped called The Education of Frederick Douglass. So this guy was very personally aware of the transformative power of education. And, after hearing what Trustee Watkins was talking about, I was just thinking about this the other day in a different context. I was driving across the FDR Mid-Hudson Bridge, and I thought about, FDR's freedom from fear, and how I'm actually more afraid of getting shot up in my own campus at RCC than I am where I teach in a maximum security correctional facility once a week. The world shouldn't be like that, y'all. It really shouldn't. And the world Frederick Douglass was in, where children are ripped from their parents and see relatives beaten. The world shouldn't be like that. But I was thinking about how I feel safer teaching in a prison. And when I assigned Frederick Douglass to those students, that passage about him becoming so much more discontent with life as he learns more, and the transformative power of literacy and knowledge, there's something to that. There really is something to that. And there's something important about Douglass's championing of universal public education. I think if he was with us today, he would recognize the power of public schools and just how corrosive privatization of education is in a democratic society. Back in the old days, like 70 years ago, some of our foremost scholars and intellects were trying to figure out, like, how do biases happen? What perpetuates stereotypes? And Gordon Allport came up with this concept called contact theory, which, to keep it simple, just said when you take people from different backgrounds and you put them together and they work together for a shared goal, people tend to think less stereotypically. And when I grew up, I had some relatives who are long since passed now, and I was taught all kinds of racist nonsense about Black and brown skinned people from them. But I also grew up in a diverse city, and I went to a public school, and I got relatives telling me, these people are stupid, they're inferior. I'm like, nah, like, these are my friends. Moreover, like, this dude did better than me on a math test, and this person just beat me playing football. So being in a diverse place, you get together with people, and that is so, so important. If we have a democracy where people don't even know how to coexist in the same room with each other for about a decade during their youth, how can we expect people to coexist in a civilized society where we can figure out problems together when we're coming at it from different viewpoints? So Douglass today he would continue on his championing of the power of public schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in some ways it makes sense, of course, that Douglass was a champion for universal public education because, of course, Du Bois famously, now almost 100 years ago, argued that formerly enslaved people are the reason that we have universal public schooling, right? They saw this as their duty upon gaining freedom to make education available. So I want to keep thinking about education. Also, briefly, I just want to echo Claude's point. Yes, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Please think of questions. Just now I'm seeing the time, so I'll ask Willie a question and then Earl Miller a question, and then I'll open this up to your questions, all of which is to say, if you don't think of questions, I'm just going to keep talking, which nobody wants. But to keep thinking about education, this is for you, Willie Trotman. How does the NAACP in Rockland County work to ensure educational equity today, particularly in advocating for the inclusion of Black history in schools and addressing disparities in resources and opportunities for Black students?
Okay, so we have a working education committee that we meet on a regular basis with the monitors, with the superintendent, and we interact with different political figures. In terms of Black history, we've been to several Black history programs, as well as My Brother's Keeper, and we've advocated for those. It's that old saying, if you don't know where you've been, you won't know where you're going kind of thing. We understand that, and that's very, very important. So whether it was Frederick Douglass or whether it was Thurgood Marshall, we continue to echo those sentiments because it appears that we never did integrate in the United States. We never did. If when I went to school, it was all Black from first grade throughout my graduation in high school. If I leave New York and I drive from Florida, I guarantee you, and if kids were in the playground from New York to Florida, I could guarantee you what kind of neighborhood it is. So we never did integrate. Rockland County, when Thurgood Marshall, the white parents just took their kids out and put them in private schools. So we continue to have those same battles that we had 50 years ago. But we advocate, I mean, we've seen some very well constructed Black history programs. Black history is very, very important. And what I like to say is our kids need role models, and if we don't teach Black history, they don't have role models. If we don't teach Black history, kids will not know where they came from. And then, and it's important, we ask people like Mondaire Jones, who graduated from here, could you come back and speak? Speak not as a politician, but speak as an individual who told you that you would never be anybody. Yet you became the first congressman from the 17th district, first Black congressman from the 17th district. So we also want those role models in school. It's very, very important. We reached out to the commissioner of jurors, let our kids come to court. That's very, very important. Let them see what it is. We want the kids to start registering to vote, as I stated earlier, at the age of 16. Learn the voting process and learn what can be lost, if you're not educated. And so with the Spring Valley branch, it's every week. We'll start meeting with politicians within the next week, and we'll continue that process to ensure that the kids from here are not forgotten. And I think that we owe that, to the Thurgood Marshalls, to the Martin Luther Kings, to the Malcolm. We owe that to them to teach our kids. And so therefore, through our education committee, we meet regularly. We bring up those kinds of topics about the school books and things of that nature, and how important it is to get an education. And even with somebody like Rockland Community College, what's the gateway for our kids to get in there for those kids who cannot financially get there. And so we continually to work, and we meet almost weekly in reference to education, because it's so very, very important. And if you look at Rockland County, what I like to say is that while Rockland County is one of the most diverse counties in the state of New York, it's also the most segregated state, in terms of educational. You can compare East Ramapo to Pearl River High School and ask how that's changed. And so it's important that we continue every day to work on education for our youth.
Thank you, Willie. That was great. Now, of course, education doesn't only happen in formal schools, right? For many of us, education also happens in the church. Please do keep thinking of questions also. Before I ask, or after I ask Reverend Miller, I'll open this up for questions. But education for many of us also happens in the church. So, Reverend Miller, in your experience, how can religious institutions draw on Douglass's example to promote justice, healing, and education?
Well, historically, the church has been the center of our communities. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, West Hunter Street Baptist Church, and in the community which Dr. King lived. And just that tradition, my grandfather was a Baptist minister. He actually was a pastor at the Ebenezer Baptist Church and worked with Dr. King's father there. So that reality of church as the center of the community also was very real to me as a center of education, inspiration, and support for the future generations of our community. I think that there has to be an ongoing acknowledgement and commitment by the church to be that resource for our community and for our future leaders and citizens of this country. Again, I think also it should be a source of the spiritual inspiration so that we have the inner resources to stand and to continue to persevere in our fight for freedom as individuals in the society, as a community, as a people, in this systemic oppression that we might recognize as our country. I think one principle that should be highlighted, again, I appreciate the opportunity to sort of highlight or to speak about the spiritual journey of Douglass because he really sought to bring a reality to the faith that rather than having a form of godliness that denies the power, he wanted to see Christians or Christianity realized in its truest or purest form. And so he talked about the hypocrisy of American Christianity. He talked about the difference between false Christianity and true Christianity. And he also studied all religions. So when he spoke about faith and the power of faith, it wasn't just exclusively concerning Christianity, but the need for us to realize what we believe and commit to that belief so that it can be used as a resource. And that's not only in our personal development, but in helping others. I think one key principle was his belief in the power of love, you know, like Dr. King and Gandhi and Bob Marley, or even Dr. Edmund Gordon, who many of us know is himself a minister. From even different faith traditions, Douglass exemplified the power of divine love. And some of us, many of us are familiar with the accounts of him at the end of the lives, particularly of some of his enslavers, actually visiting them and sharing with them not just what he had become, but also a recognition of their humanity in spite of their previous behavior, because he was able to differentiate between the system that oppresses all and the individual as the oppressed. That's a divinely inspired love. And that's, again, the type of power that's necessary to be a true change agent, not just in our society, but in the world.
Thank you all. This has been wonderful to hear all of your answers, and I could ask you questions all day, but no one would be happy about that. So I'm going to open us up to audience Q&A. I believe I saw a Zoom hand raised earlier, and then it went. I'm not sure if I saw that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, I dropped a question in the chat. So the panelists can think about that. It's both for the moderator and also for the panelists. And for one of the previous speakers, Dr. Newberry, if she's still with us. You know, how do you make Frederick Douglass hip again? How do you make it relevant to the 18 to 24-year-old? I look at the people here in the audience, the average age is very high. So, you know, that's a question. And how do you use technology now to, you know, move it forward?
I'm going to leave this for our panelists or Dr. Newberry. Everyone's here to hear you speak. How do we make Frederick Douglass hip today?
I'm going to say that everybody likes when you check the gram and TikTok, it's about the fit, you know, oh, that fit was fire. You know, it's about having the fire fit. And so, Elias, I see you laughing at me. So, is there a way to show that last image at all? Am I asking too much? I am. Okay. That there was a very contemporary image of Frederick Douglass done by Bisa Butler, and just really what we may even call funky, if you will. And I think by the entire idea of his, okay, we're making progress.
No, we're not making progress.
Oh.
We got the wrong one. Still working on it.
Oh, that's okay. Working is good. By his sartorial splendor, if you will. Everyone is so concerned about how fabulous and funky fresh they fit is and how they look. Maybe taking that page from Frederick Douglass's book about always being natty, always be, hey, there you have it. Always being smart in one's attire, which was his resistance, his form of resistance, his form of letting people know that we are people who should be treated humanely. We are the finest of the fine. Maybe if somehow we could disseminate that out into the world to the younger generations, that, you know, Frederick Douglass always made sure that he was tight. I'm going to do it too, in the name of, and in the energy and in the power of Frederick Douglass. I don't know. Listen, that's my 2 cents. That's what I think may happen. That may work. I don't know. Does that make sense? Tell me, does that make sense?
Can I add to that? This is Colette Fournier. I may or may not show my face.
Okay. Hi, Colette.
Hi, everybody. I think that we should definitely give more thought to Kwanzaa because of the many principles. I thought I heard somebody mention something about cooperative economics. So I think because of when Kwanzaa comes, it just seems like if people are still so concentrated on Christmas, when to me, that's where the energy should really go in terms of our history. In terms of African American History Month, which is what I like to call it, this morning, I taught my photo class and I introduced my students to the master photographer, Gordon Parks. Now, many of my students are Hispanic. I think what happens with the African American and the Haitian students is possibly they don't have the budget to take a photography class because it is costly. When I was in Florida a couple of years ago, I was stuck there during COVID. And I pushed and I pushed to the libraries, not so much the churches, but I pushed to share my retrospective Spirit of a People, which was like an hour and a half presentation. But there were gatekeepers, but I pushed past the gatekeepers to show my images to whomever in the community, especially people of color who need this education. We are really a dying community, and it's very sad. But like I said, I really think we need to just, continue, put more programming into those 7 days of Kwanzaa, because I think we have an audience there. And Frederick Douglass was the man. I mean, I was born on 8th Avenue, and now 8th Avenue is Frederick Douglass Boulevard. Thank you.
Elias, I think since you still have the image up, I really think this possibly is Bisa Butler's bid, if you will, for making Frederick Douglass. There's no way to contemporize him. I don't want to say that, but for making him accessible to a different different generations. Does that make sense? You gonna back me up, David? Lucander, you gonna back me up?
100%. And Kim, I was actually hoping you would take that question. One, because it's just like right up your kind of skill set, but two, if we're kind of talking about making things relatable, that's what teachers do. And Douglass was one of these people. I've heard people who were associated with Dr. King talk about this. They're just people who make you feel smarter when you're in the room with them, and I've seen you do that. Like, this is just a thing that, like, like, I'm a Red Sox fan, and you could read the Yankees lineup to me and it would sound inspiring. And Frederick Douglass doesn't need a Kimberly Newberry. Like, he's inspiring on his own. Like, his life story, the struggles he went through, the traumas he went through, and he never let that stuff define him. And Douglass is so inspiring for us these days because, this is a guy who got free, and he could have became a whaler off the coast of New England. He could have become a clothes salesman. He could have gone to Canada and been free from Article 4, Section 2, the Fugitive Slave Act and the Constitution. But Douglass knew that everything worth having is better shared. And who doesn't understand that? Douglass said, I'm free. We all going to get free. And young people understand that. They look good. They want to take a picture and post it because everything worth having is better shared. That's just human nature. Education, everything worth having is better shared. That's why you teach people what you know. Inspiration, hey, I'm inspired. I'm not going to keep that to myself. You got love in your heart, you share it. You don't sit on some glacier in the Himalayan mountains meditating. You share that love. You got wisdom in your spirit, knowledge in your mind. You share it. Look, when my spouse and kid are away, I eat ramen noodles and hot dogs for dinner because a good meal is something you share with people. Like, that's so understandably human. And Douglass, like, we can all get that. That's inspiring. He got free and he shared that.
Can I just add to that very briefly? I would say that in order for someone from the 1800s to be relatable, we need to make him relatable. So whether that be through photography or through the reality of the fact that he couldn't read and write and he was able to accomplish all that he was able to accomplish. So a student in school who struggles academically, we can make Frederick Douglass real to him. Because he didn't struggle academically, he was denied academically, and he still rose above and beyond the expectations of anyone in his community or in the world at the time that he existed in. But I think it's very important that when they take away Black history from schools, when they deny our students and our children the reality or the ability to learn Black history in the school buildings, we have to do what my parents did, sit down and learn. I didn't learn Black history in school. I learned it at home. And we as a community and as a collective need to educate our young people about Frederick Douglass because it's over 100 years. Young people think that he's unrelatable because he's old, and we need to change that. So thank you. Great question.
All right, Elias, we have a couple of questions here, and we don't have that many minutes left in our program, so let's address some of those questions.
Yeah, can we maybe hear both Andrew Jacobs and Jeanette Miller, and then I'll open it to the panelists to respond.
Andrew, did you want to go first or?
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll just go quickly. I had a question, but maybe I'll just keep it to a comment, just to be brief here. I really want to echo what Dr. Newberry was saying and Dr. Lucander. I think that Frederick Douglass is quite accessible. I think in many ways. I mean, I think the suit really, if you look at Cornell West, I think he's a kind of modern day, sartorially speaking. Frederick Douglass, I think that's an element that really captures people. Just everything he writes is just pretty brilliant. Nothing, power concedes nothing without demand. It's just a wonderful quotation. Just to add to that, there's one more I love from the same speech where he says, "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters." That's pretty stirring stuff. And I find that students are very moved by it. And in fact, I'd also add, I know the people on screen may be more white-haired than the rest of the people that are off screen, but I know that I have at least a few of my own students here who I think are very excited about Frederick Douglass. So I think there is a kind of wellspring of interest in him, and I think we just have to put him in front of people, and I think he's likely to be very inspiring.
Could you just let us know which school you're from, and could the student just kind of
Sure.
raise their hands?
Yeah, sure. Oh, the ones that my students, you mean?
They could just give a thumbs up.
Yeah, let's see, where are they? Have they left? They may have had to leave.
Okay.
I'm looking. I know that I had at least 2 or 3. Bree and Ritsuki is there.
There she is. Okay.
And yep, and there was one more. I'm trying to look through my list. Yep, yeah, I teach at Rockland Community College.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, Jeanette Miller.
I just had wanted to echo what Ms. Watkins had said and just thank her for, we have a responsibility. I think just in terms of making sure we support and promote and lift up our young voices. We see now in this technological age, we have a lot of influencers on TikTok and Instagram who are actually taking the reins themselves and sharing history stories of our heroes and sheroes from our history, even going back beyond slavery into Egypt, and even professors, art history professors and African-American, African diasporan professors are using YouTube to make classes and even lectures where people have access to learn more. And also just, I know he is not yet 18 years old, but I think we should go to the young people themselves and ask them, how can we best engage them? So even Josiah and his mother, I'd like to hear from them. What would it take, or what would resonate for him or make him more excited about learning about people like Frederick Douglass?
I think that the way that I teach him about Black history and the other youths that I is to make it relatable. So if I have to do it in a song, if I have to do it in a dance, I find a way to make it relatable to what they would understand and enjoy, while also teaching them educationally about, per se, Frederick Douglass. So I think just making it relatable and involving them kind of helps them to remember, to relate it, giving examples of life and how you can relate to what Frederick Douglass went through, or how he overcame certain obstacles and how they can also overcome those type of obstacles. So I think just making it relatable in any way that you can would be helpful.
Well, thank you all so much for your questions, comments. Thank you, of course, to our panelists. Please join me in a heartfelt applause. And personally, a deep apology that I didn't get to ask you more questions. But thank you all so much. And I'm going to hand this back over to Jamila for some business.
Well, thank you, everyone. Please stay tuned for a couple of minutes. We have a public service announcement coming up from Drusilla Kinzonzi.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, thank you for being with us tonight for this enlightening event on the relevance of Frederick Douglass on today's world. The African American Historical Society of Rockland County is dedicated to educating the public on the historical, cultural, and social experiences of the African diaspora, particularly in our region. Our mission is to promote and preserve the rich history of people of African descent in Rockland County and the Lower Hudson Valley. Tonight's outstanding program is an excellent example of our commission. We want you to become a member if you're not a member already. By doing so, you'll be supporting our ongoing research, public programming, identification of heritage sites, and efforts to expand our digital presence. As a member, you'll receive regular updates and information. You'll get invitations to our events and initiatives, and you'll have the great satisfaction of knowing that you are actively contributing to the preservation and promotion of African American history in Rockland County and beyond. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and your membership will assist us in continuing this vital work. General membership is just $25. $10 for seniors like me, and $15 for the youth. So you have two options. You can renew your annual membership right now, or you can join today as a first-time partner. You'll see the QR code on the screen. Take out your cameras and take a snapshot of that and partner with us and help us in preserving and sharing this important history for future generations. Simply scan that QR code. You can also go directly to our website, aahsofrockland.org. Don't delay, renew your membership for 2025 if you are a member, or join us today. Thank you in advance for your support.
Thank you so much, Drusilla. I want to thank everyone for joining us, but I especially want to thank the AAHS Board of Trustees who helped to put these programs together, and you'll see them all listed here. Thank you very much. I also want to give a special thank you to Maria Vanessa and Finkelstein Memorial Library who partnered with us on this particular program. I want to thank everyone who participated in this event. A special thanks to Vicki Copeland, to Josiah Hawley, to Curtis McDuffie, to Dr. Kimberly S. Newberry, to Willie Trotman, Dr. David Lucander, Reverend Earl Miller, Latanya Watkins, Esquire, to Dr. Elias Rodriguez, and a special thank you to all of you, our community. We certainly appreciate having you here to celebrate Black History Month. Keep up the fight, keep up the resilience, keep spreading the word, keep supporting us. We appreciate you. Have a very, very good night. Thank you for being here.
Please put up that QR code one more time. Someone asked for it, but in the chat, you'll also find the link.
There you go. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.